Welcome to Chef Leadership Academy. I'm Professor Jagdish Sheth. This is a lecture or a presentation on the future of learning in the digital age. Learning will shift from 3 R's of learning, which is what the industrial age paradigm was, reading, writing, arithmetic, to what I call the 3 I's of learning. Learning will be more interactive, more integrated, and more individualized. What I'm going to do is to give you the historical perspective of learning paradigms over time, then talk about the uniqueness of the digital technology and how it is going to transform the way we teach and the way we learn. The focus of my presentation is primary and secondary school, although the principles equally apply for higher education. I will talk about implications for educators, primarily high school teachers, for example, and what will be the new governance mechanism in terms of the relationship between the teacher, the student, the parents, and the administration. So let me start by showing the first chart, which is the evolution of learning and technology. In the farming age, learning was all on spoken language. The medium was spoken, not written language. And this goes back thousands of years of history. In fact, most ancient civilizations which accumulated wisdom and knowledge, articulated them, was primarily an oral history where it was passed on from one generation to the next. People went to academies where they studied strictly by listening, not writing. The educator, the guru, the disciple of any religion, etc. And the objective of learning at that time was what I call the 3 C's of learning. Most of the learning was strictly learning the occupation from somebody else who knew or from the family. So I call it craft. Craft is all the handicrafts people made, small tools they had in the farming days. Whatever craft would be, farming itself would be a craft. Learning also came from congregation or from the faith or religion. So it could be the church, it could be the temple, it could be the mosque, whatever they are. And the third place where the learning came was the community. In other words, the social governance mechanism, people understood what is right and wrong. I have strongly believed that social governance was more powerful than the rule of law, for example. And we need to think about social governance as a key mechanism that comes from community cohabitation, community sharing things, community living and breathing together. That's the farming age. Now comes the industrial age, where the primary way of learning became print medium. Print allowed more mobility in the process. The knowledge could travel some other place because it was printed in a book, and the book could be packaged and shipped it out. The print medium became very revolutionary in the learning literature, transformed the way we learn, the way we teach. Textbooks came, for example, not just the view of one individual, but synthesis and codification of multiple perspectives. Surprisingly, as you would expect, the print technology, the first thing printed for masses was the Bible, which was learning from, in this case, the faith of some sort. Same thing happened with Bhagavad Gita later on, which was printed for Hinduism. Same thing happened for Quran, for the Islam religion. Print traveled the ideas, print made everything go wider, etc. So if you look at my vertical axis or y-axis in the chart, it talks about the scope and the scale, and it rises in the industrial age with the print medium. And what were the 3 R's of learning that we all studied and taught? Reading, writing, and arithmetic. And the reason why literacy became important was because we were going to train people to go to the factory where literacy was necessary. Now comes the knowledge age. The medium now is digital medium, and I'll articulate in more ways about what it means. And my view is that the paradigm is going to shift from 3 R's of learning to 3 I's of learning. With this technology, the learning will be a lot more interactive between student and the educator. It'll be more integrated. In other words, what is common between music and math, for example? What is common between chemistry and physics, for example? Learning will be integrated, and the learning would be personalized, what we call mass customization or mass personalization. So even though you have a class of 100 or more students, I can individually deal with each student in a very much like a one-on-one learning, even though it is on a large mass scale. Hence, we call it mass personalization or mass customization. So let's talk about what is unique about the digital age. Here are about 9 different ideas that I have, which are put together into a pie chart. The first major paradigm shift is that learning will be much more affordable. Digital technology is very affordable technology. Today, even an ordinary citizen can afford a cell phone or a smartphone for that matter. This is very key. Learning now becomes, with this technology, what I call democratization of learning. What I call, in fact, in this particular case, egalitarianism, level playing field between different socioeconomic classes, level playing field across faiths, level playing field across age, denomination, no matter how you look at it. Democratization of learning is very key outcome because this technology makes it so affordable compared to previous technologies. Today, a memory chip is actually cheaper than paper. Think about that. And in my little flash drive, I can store the whole Library of Congress, which says that the whole library comes to me. I don't even have to go to the library. I make that library portable and therefore affordable, free, however it turns out to be. And we do have many learning platforms in the digital age which are free in many ways. The content is enormous out there, which is all user generated or free content, which I will talk about a little later on. Learning it will be more accessible. The urban-rural divide gets shrinking more and more. Emerging markets versus advanced economies, there are no differences. If anything else, emerging economies are actually leading in terms of access to knowledge, content, education, formal or not so formal or informal. You do have a MOOC platforms, as they are called, large-scale open sourcing learning, such as Coursera, for example, or edX. There are quite a few, which is very fascinating. So it becomes accessible anywhere, everywhere is possible. So as I call it, rural-urban divide is not going to be there or will shrink quite a lot. This is a very rich medium. Voice could not do print or image. Print could not do video. Today, not only I can have numerical learning, alphabetical learning, but I have the video learning, imaging learning. So voice, video, text are all combined together. And it's all possible on one single platform, and I can integrate and mix and match them. So while I'm reading the article, I may have a link toward YouTube to watch some video. In other words, as a rich medium, it is much more holistic. All 5 senses, or as many senses as possible, can be involved in absorbing the knowledge. These devices are intuitive to use. I call it the Apple revolution because Apple simply did not provide any instructions how to operate the device. Whether it's an Apple phone, iPhone, Apple, for example, iMac, which is their computer, or an iPad. Apple changed the whole thing from the typewriting days. It's a huge disruptive transformation where when people learned how to type, quitry system as we call it, Apple basically did not imitate that, but allowed primarily touch as the way to gather information, to shift information, to watch information. So today, an infant can actually play with an iPad by scrolling things, by punching things, by fingerprints, which is interesting. So it's very intuitive technology, which again makes it more egalitarian in the process. Real-time updates. Knowledge is no longer has a lead lag where knowledge is created, it is packaged and printed, then it is put in the library. I have to go to the library. Today, I can get my knowledge real time. In fact, as I'm videotaping this thing, new knowledge is coming to me on my device. They are basically stored someplace while I'm taping the video here on my presentation. Surprisingly, because of that, half-life of knowledge is getting shorter and shorter and shorter. Even sciences that we thought were invariant, like physics, we are able to update and upgrade and question actually some of the fundamentals of physics, whether it's an Einstein view or whether it's a some other physicist view. More importantly, with new devices, we are able to discover new galaxies. We never imagined there were so many galaxies out there similar to solar systems, and as we discover them into deep space, we are revising our theories about how astronomy as a discipline is organized or is theorized. This is also true about the evolution of mankind. With newer discovery technologies, we are able to go further down and mark as to when did it happen. So that discipline is also changing. Paleontology is changing in the process. This is very key. Which says that all of us as educators have to become students and learn almost simultaneously with the students. I do remember in my classes, if the student has a laptop open, while I'm talking about a case study of some sort, he or she immediately goes and gives me more updated information than what I had in the morning before my class or what I had a week ago or a year ago. Real-time knowledge updating is a very key activity, which only this technology is able to do. Next area is social media. The rise of social media is transforming not only social media, but also learning and everything else in life. Largest nations in the world are no longer China and India as we thought, but I call a new nation which has already 2 billion people and many more are added every day, and I call it the Facebook nation, which is global upfront, does not recognize any jurisdictional boundaries of nations as we think, does not recognize the boundary between rich and the poor, literate and illiterate even for that matter. It's fascinating. So social media is transforming quite a lot in the way students are learning, in the way teachers will teach. Similarly, there is a huge amount of user-generated content. I mean, YouTube produces enormous amount of user-generated content, stores it, archives it, basically curates it. Again, it's mind-boggling to see how much new knowledge is created, and this is accumulated, which means it's a cumulative knowledge, which means there is no replacement. It is stored forever. And this user-generated knowledge is not just limited to YouTube for entertainment, but also Wikipedia, which is user-generated scholarly knowledge, almost replacing Britannica, for example. I remember the days when I used to look forward to buying the whole encyclopedia if I can afford it, and then volume each year, which will update printed copy about all the knowledge that was created in the world in that year. Today, my kids, my grandchildren, have no affinity toward encyclopedia, the physical ones. Not only that, but I can take that whole knowledge and put it on a disk or even a flash drive for that matter and pass it on to them. Totally different world. Knowledge is no longer captive by time and by location. It is already out of prison. It is liberated. It goes wherever the person is. We also see the rise of artificial intelligence, or what I call bots and robots. Bots are more for the software side, robots are more on the physical side. So we are creating this whole new way where bots and robots may actually become more and more teaching assistants. Who said robots and bots cannot do additional work of grading, for example, assessment, feedback? It can be done. Just like teaching assistants do or substitute teachers do in many ways. This unique characteristics of the digital technology, as I mentioned, will transform the way we learn and teach from 3 R's of learning to 3 I's of learning. Learning will be interactive. With interactiveness, we know all the scientific research, there is a better engagement. With better engagement, all we know there is a better learning. With better learning through engagement, all we know is better retention. So the knowledge is learned better. Knowledge is much more exciting in terms of passion. There's more emotive aspect in learning, not just the cognitive aspect. And therefore, this interactivity or interactive learning becomes a very key outcome and therefore necessary as an objective of learning. Second one, learning will get more integrated. Right now, we are all specialists. I'm a math professor. I'm a physics professor. I'm English literature, whatever they are, and we don't connect the dots. Because we learn ourselves, once we get a master's and a PhD, to super specialize ourselves. But the knowledge can be very integrative if we know how to connect the dots. So for example, I have raised the question, what is common between English, music, and math? We have to do meta-analysis, which basically says that all 3 are languages. Now we have a commonality. As languages, you have certain protocols. As languages, you have certain syntax. So what's the syntax of music? What's the syntax of math versus the syntax of language or English, for example? I think that's very possible. Same thing, what's common between physics and chemistry? People tend to be either chemistry lovers or mechanical physics lovers. But there is something in common. Both ultimately try to somehow understand the environment, the physical, the real world out there. Again, we need to figure out, while physics may be theoretically based on mathematics, for example, chemistry may be much more a discovery science, but there is a way the two converge, and how do we think about converging the two, or what I call connecting the dot. Best innovations come from connecting the dots, not through breakthrough technology or innovations within the same silo. A lot of potential of fusion, as I call it. If I can fuse mechanical with electrical, electromechanical, if I can fuse electrical with electronics, for example, if I can fuse, just goes on and on, as it is true in entertainment with all the creative media today, today's movies and documentaries are made, much more fusion is possible. Fusion between special effects and the real world, etc. Third and most important is that it gets individualized or mass personalization. And here I always take the analog between a French restaurant and a Chinese restaurant. What's the difference? French restaurant has very limited menu. The chef has trained for many, many years on that particular recipe. He does not like to change the recipe, even though a customer or a guest at the restaurant may want something different, less spice, more salt. He refuses to do all that. And you contrast that with a Chinese restaurant. How big is the menu? Very large, 120 items easily. Do you think he has 120 recipes? Of course not. He has maybe 11, 12 ingredients, 5, 6 condiments. He can mix and match. As we teach in mathematics classes, factorials are very key. I can create unlimited variety from a few raw material or ingredients combinations by making combinations. That's the future of personalization. In other words, I can have different ways, different paces for different pupils. Those who are way ahead of the class, they have a separate way of learning, and those who are way behind the class, you have extra remedial learning or pace it on a slower pace in some fashion. Bots and robots as teachers, as aides, I'm totally convinced. 10 years from now, we won't be even debating this thing. Especially the bots on the software side is a lot quicker through applications, if nothing else. So what are the implications of these 3 I's of learning for educators, for teachers, or for professors? First, tablet replaces textbooks. More and more students will be now asked to just buy a tablet, whether it's a PC-based or a Mac-based, and that becomes the textbook. They don't have to carry the backpack as they do right now. And all the policymakers are thinking in public schools whether one switches over from the print books, for example, to a single tablet. I can store, I can manipulate, I can do many things with a tablet knowledge than I can do with my textbooks. Second area is flipping the classroom, which means classes are no longer for giving lectures and then let the student do homework on that lecture. It is the reverse. Classes are videotaped ahead of time, which actually puts a discipline on the teacher at the same time to articulate better, as I'm doing right now, for example. And at the same time, use the classroom time for discussion, which means students can learn from other students, peer-to-peer learning. It's called flipping the classroom. As I mentioned, bots and robots will become our new teaching assistants. That's a no-brainer with artificial intelligence, and it's a matter of time before what is peripheral becomes core. It's a matter of time. Learning, we will need to learn as educators how to curate the knowledge, which means how do museums display different artifacts? How does the library organize the content? Quite often very disparate content, multidisciplinary content, but there's a way to organize a physical library and of course the Rolodex or the card where you used to write a particular book. Today it's all digital, but it's very important. The best librarian in the world may not be the Library of Congress or any major university library or a public library of New York. It is actually Google. Google has been able to somehow curate this knowledge worldwide, organize it in a way, retrieve it so fast, so no matter what question I asked for, I get all the information related to that question pretty much at the tip of my fingertips, essentially, or my touch tip, whatever we call it nowadays. Next area is greater self-learning and participation. I think this technology will make students learn on their own as much as learn from the educators, the teachers, or the professors. Basically, we enable them through this technology. Not only that, but students will become more and more knowledge generators, not just knowledge absorption or knowledge dissemination to them. I think this is very revolutionary. I'm sure what I'm saying was true 200 years ago when print medium came and people thought that was revolutionary. But I mean it here, the scale and the scope of this technology is so massive. It is not only a rich medium, but it reaches globally instantly. Same piece of knowledge, information is now accessible on a worldwide basis on all devices, including cell phones, to tablets, to PC, to desktops. Is mind-boggling. So one has to really understand how this technology will transform from 3 R's to 3 I's of learning. So as we transition from the industrial age to knowledge age, the 3 R's of learning, reading, writing, and arithmetic, will be replaced by the 3 I's of learning. Learning will be interactive, integrated, and individualized. The digital technology will make learning more egalitarian through better affordability and accessibility. The rich-poor differences, urban rural differences will vanish very fast. Video will become the primary medium. Remember, print became the primary medium when we shifted from spoken learning to printed learning. I think now the real power of the digital technology is on the video side. Again, it reverses everything. Right now we have the textbooks and then we supplement with video clips from wherever we get it from. Now it reverses where there are video chapters and the video textbooks supplemented by occasionally print, whatever appropriate print is related to the topic, chapter, whatever it is. So video will become the primary medium supplemented by printed mediums. Embracing digital technology is not just a nice thing to do by us as educators. It will become a necessity as the library goes to the laptop. That is very simple but powerful way of thinking about how this technology is transforming, if not disrupting, the way we learn and the way we teach. Emerging economies such as China and India will leapfrog from the PC revolution. They never went through a PC revolution. They're leapfrogging it by embracing the smartphones and tablets, which says something very important, that more leading innovation in terms of usage will happen in emerging markets first, and there may be a reverse innovation where whatever happens in an emerging market in education, we will begin to adopt in advanced countries. That's a radical thought, but very true. It is happening right now. And therefore, we need to watch people who are now training and learning on a cell phone, not on a book or on a PC, or basically desktop essentially. That is very key. And they have the scale and the scope in their favor because countries like China, India, Brazil, they're very large population countries. And therefore they have a size and the scale. Digital technology will be transformational in the way we teach, interact with students, their parents, and govern the institution. So if you are a principal or a dean of a college, then this becomes very important. The whole governance mechanism now is online essentially. Transparency is inherent. Disclosures are necessary. You cannot hide behind anything. I often jokingly say that if I want to know what I did yesterday, I do a Google search on me. They've stored more information about my mundane daily activity through cameras everywhere out there, which I had no idea. But it is stored and kept there, which means there is no gated privacy anymore if you are a leader of any institution, whether leader of the nation, leader of a corporation, leader of a school, or leader of a university. There is no some such thing as my personal life and my professional life. The two are totally now blurred their boundaries. Everything is recorded. Everything is retrieved. It is always there. That's massive transformational as educators that we will experience. In this change, therefore, public policy will become increasingly important to actually transition us from the industrial to the knowledge age. I think governments can become great enablers to reduce resistance of change. Otherwise, in education and healthcare, we have huge market failures. People are comfortable in the way they do learning and teaching. Only way out is to actually have a massive mandatory change, just as we have done with smoking behavior, as we are doing it whereby now my classes are on Canvas or Blackboard, whatever the platforms are. I can know exactly the time when the students submitted their assignments. And if I have a flipping the class, my video, they have to watch their video whenever they watch, wherever they watch, and I know they watch the video fully or not. In the classroom, I have no idea. This is very key change. And rather than fight this, we are all better off embracing the technology. Thank you very much.